She inherited a rusted 1960s yacht from a grandfather she'd never met. Its body was rotting in a forgotten marina slip, and everyone told her to scrap it for parts. But when single mother Rachel Torres climbed aboard that ghost ship with her 8-year-old son, she discovered something that would turn their food stamp life into a $15 million mystery, one that someone had killed to keep hidden. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Rachel was elbow-deep in dishwater at the seaside diner. Her hands were raw from the harsh soap. Her back ached from a double shift, and her mind was calculating whether she had enough gas money to make it through the week. When her manager said there was a lawyer on the phone, her first thought was eviction. Her second was custody. Both made her stomach drop. Miss Rachel Torres? The voice was crisp, professional, nothing like the collection agency she'd grown used to dodging. Speaking, she said, wiping wet hands on her stained apron. My name is Harrison Clark from Clark Associates in Miami. I'm calling about the estate of Joaquin Torres. Rachel frowned. I think you have the wrong person. I don't know any Joaquin Torres. There was a pause. He was your grandfather, Miss Torres, your father's father. The words hit her like cold water. Her father had died when she was 3, leaving behind nothing but a faded photograph and her mother's bitter stories. She'd never heard mention of a grandfather, living or dead. I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. There's no mistake. Mr. Torres passed away last month. He left very specific instructions about his estate. Specifically, a vessel moored at Pelican Bay Marina in the Keys. It's yours now. Rachel's hand tightened on the phone. A boat. She could barely afford her rusted Honda Civic. And now she owned a boat. I don't understand. Why would he leave me anything? We never even met. The lawyer's voice softened slightly. I'm not privy to his personal reasons, Miss Torres, but the yacht is yours, along with any contents aboard. I'll email the paperwork. The slip fees are paid through the end of the month. After he hung up, Rachel stood frozen in the diner's kitchen, suds dripping from her elbows. Her son Miguel needed new school shoes. The refrigerator was making that dying wheeze again. Rent was due in 5 days. And now she owned a yacht she'd never seen from a grandfather she'd never known. That weekend, she loaded Miguel into the Civic and drove the 3 hours south to Pelican Bay Marina. The place was a graveyard for forgotten dreams. Weathered docks stretching into murky water, boats in various stages of decay bobbing in their slips. A few gleaming vessels stood out like diamonds in dirt, but most looked like they'd been abandoned by owners who'd run out of money or hope. Or both. Is that ours, Mom? Miguel pressed his face against the window, pointing at a sleek speedboat. I don't think so, baby. They found the harbormaster's office. A sun-bleached shack that smelled like cigarettes and disappointment. The man behind the desk looked up from a racing form. His weathered face creased into a frown. Help you? Rachel showed him the paperwork. I'm looking for slip 47. The boat belonged to Joaquin Torres. His expression changed immediately, something flickering across his features. Surprise, maybe concern. You're his granddaughter? Apparently. He studied her for a long moment, then grabbed a key from a pegboard. Follow me. They walked past million-dollar yachts and rust buckets, past old men patching nets and young men washing decks. The farther they went, the shabbier things became. Finally, at the very end of the last dock, he stopped. There she is, La Esperanza. Rachel's heart sank. The yacht might have been beautiful once. She could see hints of elegant lines beneath the rust and grime, but decades of neglect had turned it into a floating wreck. Green algae streaked the white fiberglass hull. The wooden deck was warped and splintering. Windows were cracked or missing entirely. Mom, it's scary, Miguel whispered, gripping her hand tighter. The harbormaster cleared his throat. Your grandfather, he was different. Kept to himself mostly. Lived on the boat the last few years. Police found him in his bunk. Peaceful-like. Natural causes. They said he lived on this? Rachel couldn't hide her dismay. Don't judge it too harsh. These old Bermuda clippers, they were built solid. Good bones underneath all that mess. Your grandfather, he knew boats. Just didn't care much about appearances. He handed her the key and started to leave, then paused. Word of advice. Most people here, they'd tell you to take whatever offer comes first, scrap value maybe, if you're lucky. But, he glanced around, lowered his voice. Your grandfather turned down a lot of offers over the years. Big money, too. Always said La Esperanza was worth more than they knew. What do you mean? But he was already walking away, leaving Rachel and Miguel alone with their inheritance. The gangplank creaked ominously under their weight. Rachel went first, testing each step. Her hand was tight on the corroded rail. The deck felt soft in places, and she steered Miguel around the worst spots. Can we go home? He asked in a small voice. Just a quick look, baby. We need to see what we're dealing with. The main cabin door was swollen shut. Rachel had to shoulder it open, wincing at the screech of protesting hinges. The smell hit them first, mildew, salt, and something else. Not decay exactly, more like old paper and metal. Inside was chaos. Not the chaos of abandonment, but of obsession. Every surface was covered with charts, maps, books, and yellowed newspapers. Nautical instruments cluttered the galley counter. A ham radio sat in pieces on what might have been a dining table. Wow! Miguel breathed, momentarily forgetting his fear. It's like a pirate ship. Rachel picked up a logbook. Its pages were swollen with humidity. Her grandfather's handwriting covered every line. Coordinates, weather patterns, notes in Spanish she couldn't read. The dates went back years. Look, Mom. Miguel had wandered toward the forward cabin. There's a bed and everything. She followed him into what must have been the master stateroom. Despite the musty air, it was surprisingly intact. The bed was neatly made with a wool blanket. A small shrine sat on the nightstand. Candles, rosary beads, and a photograph of a young woman holding a baby. Rachel picked up the photo. Her breath caught. The woman looked exactly like her father in the one picture she had of him, which meant the baby was, "That's Grandma and Daddy," she whispered. Miguel peered at it. How come we never met them? It's complicated, baby. Though she was beginning to realize she had no idea just how complicated. They spent another hour exploring. The yacht had 2 more small cabins, a cramped head with a marine toilet that probably hadn't worked in years, and an engine room that looked like a puzzle she'd never solve. Throughout it all, that strange smell persisted, metallic and somehow expectant. It wasn't until they were leaving that Rachel noticed something odd. In the main cabin, what she'd taken for built-in storage along one wall didn't match the yacht's exterior dimensions. The inside was narrower than it should be. She knocked on the wood paneling. Hollow. Mom! Just a second, baby. She ran her hands along the panel edges, feeling for a catch or seam. Nothing. But when she pressed on one section, it gave slightly. There was something behind there. A shiver ran down her spine, and not from the damp air. What kind of secrets had her grandfather been keeping? Can we go now? Miguel tugged at her shirt. I'm hungry. Yeah, sweetheart. Let's go. But as they walked back down the dock, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced back once and saw a man on a nearby yacht quickly look away. Paranoid, she told herself. Just paranoid. That night, in their tiny apartment, she tucked Miguel into bed and sat at her laptop searching for information about Rachel Torres. She found almost nothing. No social media, no news articles, no obituary beyond a basic death notice. It was like he'd been a ghost long before he died. But she did find something about La Esperanza. The yacht had been built in 1967 by a prestigious shipyard known for crafting vessels for wealthy industrialists and, whispers said, for people who needed to move things quietly across borders. Rachel stared at the screen, a chill running through her. What had her grandfather been involved in? And why had he left it all to her? The next morning brought a knock at her door. Rachel opened it to find a man in an expensive suit. His smile was too white, too eager. Miss Torres, my name is David Chin. I represent a client who's very interested in purchasing your yacht. How did you know? Word travels fast in marine circles. His smile never wavered. My client is prepared to offer you $50,000 cash today. Rachel's mouth went dry. 50,000 would change everything. New shoes for Miguel, caught up rent, maybe even a savings account. That's generous. But I haven't decided what I'm doing with it yet. Of course. But perhaps you should know, boats like that, they're money pits. Marina fees, maintenance, disposal costs. You could end up owing more than it's worth. My client's offer won't last long. After he left, Rachel leaned against the door, heart racing. 50,000 for a boat that looked ready for the scrapyard? It didn't make sense. Unless she thought about the hollow panel, her grandfather's obsessive logs, the harbor master's cryptic warning. La Esperanza was worth more than they knew, he'd said. But worth what? And to whom? That afternoon, while Miguel was at school, Rachel drove back to the marina. This time she came prepared, flashlight, crowbar, work gloves. She was done with mysteries. If her grandfather had left her something, she was going to find it. The yacht felt different in daylight, less menacing but more sad. She could see its former glory in the elegant sweep of the hull, the quality hardware beneath the tarnish. Someone had loved this boat once. She went straight to the false panel in the main cabin. With the crowbar, she carefully pried at the edges until she found where it had been sealed with marine cork. The seal was old but professionally done. This wasn't some amateur hiding spot. The panel finally gave way with a crack. Behind it was a narrow space running the length of the cabin, and packed inside, wrapped in deteriorating plastic and old canvas, were rectangular packages. Rachel pulled one out with trembling hands. It was heavy, about the size of a hardcover book. She unwrapped the plastic carefully, revealing another layer of oilcloth. Inside that was a metal case, and inside the case, she sat down hard on the mildewed cushions, staring at what she held. Gold bars. Not the fake stuff you saw in movies, but actual gold bars. Each one stamped with numbers and what looked like a government seal. The markings were in Spanish. There had to be dozens of packages in the hidden compartment. What happens next will reveal why someone killed to keep this secret, why her grandfather lived like a pauper while sitting on a fortune, and how a single mother's desperate decision would change not just her life, but expose a conspiracy that stretched back decades. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. With shaking hands, Rachel pulled out package after package. The hidden compartment ran nearly the full length of the cabin, and every inch was packed with the carefully wrapped bars. She stopped counting at 30. Her mind was unable to process the weight of what she was seeing. Each bar had markings, serial numbers, purity stamps, and something else that made her blood run cold. The seal of the National Bank of Panama, dated 1968. Rachel knew enough history to understand what that meant. 1968 was a year of coups and revolutions in Central America, of governments falling and fortunes disappearing. This wasn't just gold. This was stolen gold. Blood gold. She rewrapped one bar and shoved it in her purse, then carefully replaced the panel. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. On the dock, the same man who'd been watching yesterday was there again, pretending to work on his boat while stealing glances at La Esperanza. Rachel walked past him quickly, holding her purse tight against her side. The gold bar felt impossibly heavy, like it might tear right through the fake leather and announce her discovery to the world. Back in her apartment, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the bar while Miguel did homework in the next room. The Spanish words gleamed in the afternoon light. Banco Nacional de Panama. She opened her laptop and started searching. What she found made her sick. In 1968, a shipment of gold reserves had disappeared during a military coup in Panama. $20 million worth, nearly $150 million in today's money. The gold had been meant for government reserves but vanished during the chaos. Several officials had been executed for the theft, though the gold was never recovered. There were conspiracy theories, of course, stories of CIA involvement, of revolutionaries funding operations, of the gold being smuggled out on everything from submarines to fishing boats. But after 50 years, most people assumed it had been melted down and sold off long ago. Rachel stared at the bar on her table. Not melted. Not sold. hidden in the walls of a dying yacht by a grandfather she'd never met. Her phone rang, startling her so badly she nearly knocked the gold onto the floor. Unknown number. "Hello, Miss Torres." She recognized the voice. David Chun, the man with the too white smile. "I hope you've had time to consider my offer. I told you I need time. Time is a luxury in our business, Miss Torres. My client is eager to complete this transaction. In fact, they've authorized me to increase the offer. $100,000 cash." Rachel's heart pounded. They knew. Somehow they knew. "Why?" she asked. "Why would anyone pay that much for a wreck?" There was a pause. When Chun spoke again, his friendly tone had evaporated. "Some things are worth more than their appearance suggests. Your grandfather understood that. He was a smart man. Until he wasn't." "What does that mean?" "It means you should take the money, Miss Torres. It means you have a son to think about. It means some inheritances come with debts that can't be paid in cash." The line went dead. Rachel stared at the phone, then at Miguel bent over his math homework, pencil scratching across paper. Her sweet boy who needed so much that she couldn't give him, who deserved better than food stamps and thrift store clothes, and a mother who cried in the shower where he couldn't see. But she thought about her grandfather living on that rotting boat for years rather than touch the gold, turning down offer after offer, guarding his secret even as his body failed. Why? That night, after Miguel was asleep, she did something she hadn't done in years. She called her mother in Phoenix. Rachel and her mother hadn't spoken since a fight 2 Christmases ago. "Rachel." Her mother's voice was sharp with surprise. "What's wrong? Is Miguel okay?" "He's fine, Mom. I need to ask you about my father's family." Silence. Then, "Why are you asking about them now?" "His father died. Left me something." "Mom, did you know I had a grandfather?" Her mother's laugh was bitter. "Joaquin Torres? Yeah, I knew him. Your father idolized him. Right up until the old man disappeared when you were a baby." "Disappeared?" "Took off in that boat of his. Said he had to protect his family, whatever that meant. Left your father and me with nothing while he sailed away playing pirate. Your father never forgave him." "But why?" "Ancient history, Rachel. Whatever he left you, it's probably worthless. Just like he was." But Rachel heard something else in her mother's voice, fear. "Mom, what aren't you telling me?" "Leave it alone, Rachel. Some gifts are too expensive to accept." She hung up before Rachel could ask what she meant. The next morning, Rachel called in sick to work. She couldn't afford to, but she couldn't afford not to understand what she'd inherited either. She drove to the library and spent hours researching everything she could about the 1968 Panama gold heist. The official story was simple: corruption, theft, execution of the guilty parties. Case closed. But in newspaper archives and old forums, she found whispers of another story. 3 men had been charged with the theft but maintained their innocence until their execution. One of them, Captain Eduardo Villarreal, had been a naval officer with a perfect record. His family had always insisted he was framed, that he'd actually been trying to prevent the theft when he disappeared. Rachel's hands stilled on the keyboard. She pulled up a grainy newspaper photo of Captain Villarreal. Even across 50 years and poor reproduction, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same strong jaw. She'd seen that face in her mirror every morning of her life. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your grandfather kept the faith. Don't let them win now." Before she could respond, another text. "Marina, midnight, slip 12. Come alone. A friend of your grandfather." Rachel stared at the messages. Every rational part of her screamed that this was dangerous, stupid, potentially deadly. But the irrational part, the part that had inherited something more than DNA from a grandfather she'd never met, whispered that she'd never forgive herself if she didn't go. That night, she arranged for Miguel to sleep over at his friend Tony's house. She told Tony's mother she had to cover an emergency shift. Another lie added to the pile she was accumulating. The marina at midnight was a different world. Security lights created pools of yellow in the darkness. Boats creaked and groaned like living things. Rachel clutched her pepper spray in one hand and her phone in the other, ready to call 911 at the first sign of trouble. Slip 12 held a modest sailboat, well-maintained but anonymous. A figure stood in the shadows of the cabin. Miss Torres. The voice was old, accented Cuban, maybe. "Thank you for coming. Who are you?" He stepped into the light. An elderly man, probably in his 80s, with skin like weathered leather and eyes that had seen too much. "My name is Carlos Mendez. I sailed with your grandfather for 20 years. I helped him hide the gold." Rachel's knees nearly buckled. "Then you know." "I know everything." He gestured to his boat. "Please, we should talk inside. There are eyes everywhere, even now." "Why should I trust you?" "Because your grandfather trusted me. Because I'm the only one left who knows the whole truth. And because, Miss Torres, you're in terrible danger." Against every instinct, Rachel followed him below deck. The cabin was cramped but clean, smelling of coffee and cigars. "Your grandfather was a hero," Carlos said without preamble. "Not the kind they give medals to, the kind they try to erase." He poured 2 cups of coffee from a thermos. His hands shook slightly with age. "In 1968, your great-uncle Eduardo, yes, Captain Villarreal was your grandmother's brother, discovered the plot to steal Panama's gold reserves. High-ranking officials, both Panamanian and American, were involved. The gold was supposed to fund black operations, coups, assassinations, the dirty work of empire. Rachel wrapped her hands around the hot mug, anchoring herself. Eduardo tried to stop them. When that failed, he did the only thing he could. He took the gold himself, hid it, planned to return it when Panama had a government that couldn't be bought. But they killed him. Carlos nodded gravely. "Made an example of him. But not before he told your grandfather where to find the gold." Joaquin was young, idealistic. He believed justice would come. So he retrieved the gold and waited. For 50 years? Panama changed governments, but the corruption remained. The same families, the same interests, and those who'd wanted the gold originally, they never stopped looking. Your grandfather moved constantly, changed names, cut ties with everyone he loved, even his own son. Rachel thought of her father growing up believing he'd been abandoned. But why leave it to me? Why now? Carlos studied her with those ancient eyes. Because he was dying. Because the others who knew are all dying. And because he investigated you, Miss Torres. Single mother, working 2 jobs, never took a shortcut, never compromised your integrity even when it would have been easy. You're like him. Like Eduardo, too. Too stubborn to be bought. I have a son to protect. Yes, and that's why they'll try to buy you first. When that fails, he didn't finish. The man who contacted me, David Chun. Carlos spat. A carrion bird. He represents the grandchildren of the original thieves. They've known about La Esperanza for years but couldn't touch it while Joaquin lived. Too visible, too risky. But now they think they can pressure you. Or worse. Carlos reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. Your grandfather left instructions. Bank accounts in countries that don't ask questions. Contacts who can move the gold safely. You could take a few bars, disappear, give your son a new life. Rachel stared at the envelope. What about the rest? Return it to Panama as Eduardo wanted. There's a museum now dedicated to preserving the truth about those years. They would ensure the gold serves the people, not the powerful. And if I try? Carlos's smile was sad. Then you're as foolish as your grandfather. And as brave. They talked until nearly dawn. Carlos told her stories of her grandfather. His humor, his integrity, his terrible cooking, and his unshakable belief that somehow Eduardo would be vindicated. He showed her photographs. Joaquin as a young man standing proud on La Esperanza's deck when she was new and gleaming. Her grandmother, beautiful and laughing, before grief and abandonment hardened her heart. Her father as a boy helping to polish the yacht's brass, unaware he was polishing stolen gold's hiding place. He loved them, Carlos said quietly. Leaving was the hardest thing he ever did, but he believed protecting them meant staying away. When Rachel finally left, the sun was turning the eastern sky pink. She sat in her car watching the marina wake up and made her decision. Back at the apartment, Miguel was still at his friend's house. Rachel had a few hours before she needed to pick him up. She used them to start the first part of a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. She called Chun. "Miss Torres." He sounded pleased. "I hope you're calling with good news. I want to meet your client." Pause. "That's unusual. So is the interest in my boat. If I'm going to sell, I want to know who I'm selling to." "I see. Let me make some calls." He called back within an hour. "Tomorrow, 4 p.m., the Meridian Club downtown. My client has agreed to meet." After hanging up, Rachel made 3 more calls. First, to Mira Delgado, an investigative journalist who'd exposed corruption in Miami real estate. Second, to a lawyer who specialized in international repatriation cases. Third, to Carlos with a simple message, "It's happening." Then she went to pick up her son, wondering if she'd just signed their death warrant or their liberation. The Meridian Club occupied the penthouse of a gleaming tower downtown, all marble and crystal and the kind of quiet that only extreme wealth could buy. Rachel had worn her only good dress, black, simple, bought for a court appearance years ago. She felt like a sparrow among peacocks. Chun met her at the private elevator. His smile was tighter today, professional rather than predatory. "My client values privacy," he said as they rose. "This meeting is a professional courtesy. Don't mistake it for weakness." The elevator opened into a space that screamed money. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Biscayne Bay. The furniture probably cost more than Rachel would make in a lifetime. 3 people waited in the sitting area, an older woman, perfectly preserved in the way only money could manage, a middle-aged man with cold eyes and manicured hands, and a younger woman, early 30s, who looked bored until she saw Rachel. Then her expression sharpened with interest. "Miss Torres," the older woman said without rising. "I'm Patricia Morrison. This is my son James and my daughter Sophia. Please sit." Rachel sat carefully, aware of every thread in her old dress. "Your maiden name was Delacroix," Rachel said. It wasn't a question. She'd done her research. "Your father was Colonel William Delacroix, military attaché to Panama in 1968. Patricia's perfectly painted lips thinned. "I see you've been busy. Just curious why the daughter of a man executed for treason would want my grandfather's boat so badly." "My father was a patriot," James cut in, voice sharp. "He was following orders. The only crime was getting caught." "James." Patricia's tone could have frozen fire. She turned back to Rachel. "Let's not dance around this, Miss Torres. We both know what's on that boat. Gold that belongs to interested parties who've waited a very long time for its return." "You mean the Panamanian people?" Sophia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "How naive. That gold was already stolen when Uncle Eduardo took it. He just interrupted its journey." "To fund death squads," Rachel said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "To fund stability," Patricia corrected. "To prevent the spread of communism. To protect American interests. Your great-uncle was a fool who thought one man could stand against history. He tried to do the right thing. And look where it got him." Patricia leaned forward. "Miss Torres, I'm going to be frank. That gold is cursed. Everyone who's touched it has paid the price. Eduardo executed. My father executed. Your grandfather, a lifetime of exile and paranoia. Do you want to add your name to that list? Your son's name?" Rachel's hands clenched in her lap. "Is that a threat?" "It's a history lesson." Patricia sat back. "We're offering you $250,000. More than enough to change your life, your son's life. Take it and walk away." "And if I don't?" James spoke up, his voice casual but his eyes reptilian. "Then you'll discover what your grandfather spent 50 years running from. The families involved in this have long memories and longer reaches. Accidents happen. Children disappear. Single mothers overdose in their bathrooms." "James!" Patricia snapped, but she didn't deny his words. Rachel stood on legs that wanted to shake. Thank you for the history lesson. I'll be in touch. She was almost to the elevator when Sophia called out. You know what's funny? That gold could have changed the world back then. Now, she shrugged elegantly. It's just metal, but we'll kill you for it anyway. Family honor and all that. In the elevator down, Rachel allowed herself 30 seconds to shake. Then she pulled out her phone and sent a message to Mira. Got them on tape, every word. The wire she'd worn, Myra's idea, had caught everything. That night, Rachel sat with Miguel at their small table sharing Chinese takeout she couldn't really afford. Mom, he said through a mouthful of lo mein. Are we in trouble? Children always knew. No, baby. Why do you ask? You look scared, like when the landlord comes. She reached across and took his small hand. Remember when we talked about doing the right thing even when it's hard? He nodded solemnly. Well, Mommy has a chance to do something right, but it might mean things change for us. Change how? She thought about the envelope Carlos had given her, the escape routes, the new identities, the bank accounts. A life on the run, but a life of comfort. I don't know yet, but I promise you, whatever happens, we'll be together, and we'll be okay. Miguel squeezed her hand. As long as we're together, it's okay. That night, after he was asleep, Rachel made her choice. She called the lawyer she'd contacted, then Mira, then Carlos. By dawn, she'd set in motion a plan that would either save them or destroy them. The story broke 3 days later. Mira Delgado's exposé ran at the same time in the Miami Herald and online, complete with audio recordings from the Meridian Club meeting. Blood Gold, a 50-year cover-up, detailed the original theft, the executions, the decades of hunting for the missing fortune. Rachel had given Mira everything: documents from the yacht, Carlos's testimony, her grandfather's logs decoded by a historian who specialized in Cold War Latin America. The story revealed not just the gold's existence, but the network of families who'd profited from that era's dirty wars and were still pulling strings across South Florida. The response was immediate and explosive. Patricia Morrison's lawyers issued furious denials. James Morrison was caught on camera attacking a photographer. Sophia simply disappeared. Federal investigators, drawn by the mention of historical intelligence operations, began making inquiries. But Rachel had vanished too. The morning the story broke, she and Miguel were already gone. Carlos had arranged everything: a friend with a boat, a route through the Bahamas, eventually to Costa Rica, where other exile families had found refuge. But she hadn't run to hide. She'd run to complete her grandfather's mission. The gold moved in stages, a few bars at a time, sold carefully through contacts Carlos trusted. The money went directly to the Panamanian Museum of National Memory, with strict instructions that it fund education programs about the 1968 coup and its victims. Rachel kept nothing for herself except one bar, which she had melted down and recast into a plaque that read, Captain Eduardo Villarreal, Patriot and Protector, your truth is finally told. Took a year of careful movements, of looking over her shoulder, of Miguel asking why they couldn't go home. But bar by bar, the gold returned to Panama. Not to the government, governments change too easily, but to the people through museums, schools, and scholarship funds for the descendants of those killed in the coup. The Morrisons and their allies searched frantically. They sued the newspaper, threatened witnesses, hired investigators. But Rachel had learned from her grandfather. She moved like smoke, never staying anywhere long enough to be caught. Then one day the calls stopped. The threats ended. Patricia Morrison suffered a stroke and retreated from public life. James was indicted on unrelated corruption charges. Their allies found other battles to fight. The war was over. Eduardo Villarreal had won, 50 years after his death. Rachel and Miguel returned to Florida on a warm September morning. La Esperanza was gone, sold by the state after being seized as evidence. Their apartment had been rented to someone else. But Mira met them at the airport with keys to a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Anonymous benefactor, she said with a wink. Apparently, someone was very grateful for the museum donations. The house was simple but clean, with a yard where Miguel could play and a garage where Rachel could work. She found a job at a marine repair shop, her story making her something of a legend among the boat community. One evening, as she watched Miguel do homework at a kitchen table that didn't wobble in a house with air conditioning that worked, she thought about her grandfather, about the choices he'd made, the family he'd sacrificed, the faith he'd kept. She pulled out the one thing she'd kept from the yacht, his logbook. In the back, in shaky handwriting from his final days, he'd written, "To my granddaughter I never met, I'm sorry for the years stolen from us. I pray you understand that sometimes protecting the truth means living apart from those we love. The gold was never mine, just as it was never theirs. It belongs to the ghosts, Eduardo, and all the others who died for refusing to bow to power. See it home for me. Let their children know their fathers were heroes, not thieves. And know that I loved you all, even from afar." Rachel closed the book, tears streaming down her face. Outside, Miguel played soccer with neighborhood kids, his laughter bright as coin. They'd lost a fortune in gold. They'd gained something worth far more. 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday, Rachel stood in the Panamanian Museum of National Memory. The Eduardo Villarreal exhibit had just opened, funded entirely by anonymous donations. School children filed past displays showing the true history of the 1968 coup, the men who tried to stop it, and the gold that had traveled 50 years to come home. An elderly woman approached Rachel, moving slowly with a cane. "You're her," she said in accented English. "Joaquin's granddaughter." Rachel nodded carefully. She tried to attend anonymously. "I'm Eduardo's daughter. Your cousin, I suppose." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "They told us my father was a traitor. My mother died believing it. My children grew up ashamed. But now," she gestured at the exhibit, at her father's portrait hanging where everyone could see. "Now they know the truth. Their grandfather was a hero." The two women embraced, strangers bound by blood and secrets finally brought to light. As Rachel flew home that night, Miguel sleeping against her shoulder, she thought about inheritances. Her grandfather had left her a boat full of gold, but the real treasure had been the chance to right an old wrong, to restore honor to the dishonored, to prove that sometimes, not often, but sometimes, truth wins over power. La Esperanza was gone, but its name lived on. Hope. Her grandfather had named his boat Hope, and in the end, hope was exactly what he'd left her. Anyone can find themselves holding someone else's secrets. The question is whether you'll have the courage to do what they couldn't, to finish the story they started, no matter the cost. As Rachel Torres sat in her small Florida home, watching her son grow taller and stronger each day, she knew the answer. She'd chosen truth over treasure, justice over comfort, and her grandfather's mission over her own safety. The gold was gone, returned to its rightful place. The Morrisons were broken, their empire of lies finally exposed. And somewhere in Panama, children learned their real history because one woman refused to let the powerful bury the truth any longer. Some inheritances come with strings attached. Some come with chains. But the rarest ones come with wings, the chance to lift others up, to right old wrongs, to turn blood gold into something pure. Rachel Torres had inherited more than a rusty yacht. She'd inherited a legacy of courage, and she'd passed it on bar by bar, truth by truth, until the ghosts could finally rest. Because in the end, the only real treasure is the truth we leave behind. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to discover more incredible tales, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe some secrets are worth exposing.